Okay, thank you guys for being here. I'm so excited. This is the Wild panel for the Outfronts. And we have an amazing cast of characters here. We have Amy B. Harris, Sarah Stryker, Erana James, and Mia Healey. I am really, really excited because I am a big fan of the Wilds, not only just for the gay, which is always an added bonus, but I love just like, anything YA that's super queer, super, girl fronted. I'm stoked to be here talking to you guys. Thank you for doing this. I figured because this is Outfest or the Outfronts that we would just start it off in the queerest way possible. And I can ask you guys what your star signs are. Let's just get that out there. Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I am I'm a Capricorn, and I have been told I'm quite a classic Capricorn in the sense that I'm driven, controlling, and quite self-conscious about my own competency about this, that, and the other. So
love that. Love to be unsure. Although you have no reason to be. Amy, how about you?
I am a Pisces with a Cancer rising.
Wow.
And my astrologer told me if I didn't have Aries in my 10th house, I would most likely be a drug addict. So it's a lot of water. It's very loosey-goosey and lost. But I guess Aries is career and ambition. So in the 10th house. So that's the one that keeps me going, I guess.
That's great. A narrow miss, a lucky one.
Yes, a lucky miss for me.
Mia and Erana, how about you?
I'm a Virgo, which I always thought that I wasn't a Virgo. I just never really related to it. And as I get older, I see myself becoming more and more Virgo, like quite pragmatic, and I guess organized. Not in my bedroom, but in my life. I feel like I'm quite organized.
I am an Aquarius sun, which is quite true, even though to my detriment sometimes. And a Pisces moon and a Gemini rising.
Wow. Thank you for the full chart.
I love that we all know our full charts.
Oh, yeah. I can break it down naturally.
Thank you, guys. I feel safe now. I'm comfortable and settled in. So I want to start off by talking for real this time about just, the world of the show and the creation process behind it. Sarah, you created the show. What was your creative process in making all of these characters, especially in regards to Tony and Shelby? Are there real people in your life that inspired them, or queer stories that inspired you?
The character generation process is almost difficult to talk about very coherently, which is not a great answer from a writer who is purportedly should be able to kind of talk about the how the sausage is made. But I think there's something a little bit, once I had this premise and once that I knew that I wanted to put, 8 young women on this deserted island, I definitely thought about the ensemble. I started with Leah because she is a bit of a surrogate for myself, a very overthinking writerly type who had just been through a breakup. That was the autobiographical way in. But then once I had the notion that, okay, well, I'm going to have this ensemble around them. I want all of these young women to be, relatable, but also very distinct. And you have to kind of a little bit create a symphony when you are creating an ensemble. People have to hit high notes, low notes, people who are action driven, who can, push things forward, people who are more reluctant, and that will create the conflict, people who are more emotional, less emotional, so that you have just enough grist in the mill to make the conflicts really pop. So when I sat down to actually generate the characters, it was a lot of mining into the young women that I have known in my life. That is sort of where I started. Again, it is hard to talk about because there's almost like an alchemical thing I think that happens when you are a writer alone trying to build this group, you kind of wait for voices to come to you. That sounds very, kind of woo-woo. And I generally don't love to come off that way, but I really just sort of waited to hear and feel the inspiration from individuals as they bubbled up. And one person who came to me was a young woman that I'd known in junior high. She was an athlete, and she had a very kind of hair trigger temper. And that was the inspiration for Tony. And I mean, this was a girl that I admired so deeply because I was this very closed off Midwestern child who never wanted to do anything wrong. And here was this girl who was so able to tap into that animal, like, I'm angry and I'm going to show it. And so I have a lot of admiration for that. And so Tony was really crafted from that place. And then, Shelby certainly came into the fold as a little bit drawn from a few of the more, I guess, faith-driven young women that I'd known in my high school years also, who, they had this incredible faith. And that also was something that I admired. Every single one of these characters embodies a quality that I really kind of coveted. To have a faith that supports you, carries you, feeds you, is something that I really didn't have. I grew up very irreligious. In terms of their sexuality, I had always intuited, again, in an alchemical sort of just, this is what I felt, that Shelby was someone who was carrying this, she was gay and she was trying to figure it out amidst the swirl and haze of this faith, a very fundamentalist faith that, made it difficult for her to express that. As for Tony, I will be quite transparent in that this Tony being a lesbian was something that I felt initially, but did not exactly lock in. We had this huge ensemble, and, Leah was such a big part of the pilot that, there was a lot of meditation on her character. But for the others, it was like, okay, I'm going to flesh them out this much, but there are some things that I felt almost reluctant to really lock in. And Tony's sexuality, was one of them. I wanted to create this inclusive ensemble with many different young women from many different backgrounds, of many different racial, socioeconomic origins. And, when it came to Tony, for example, she is an Indigenous character. She is from Minnesota. She is an orphan of sorts, a child of the foster system. That's so many layers of things that I personally am not, that, when it came to really thinking about her sexuality, I was like, okay, I'm going to be very careful about this. I'm going to maybe not lock it in the most certain way. And I will wait until the writer's room.
That's really the beauty of a writer's room, I think, which is why I love television much more than I enjoy writing for film, which is you get to kind of build out this beautiful room of voices that then give voice to your characters. And I think for me, obviously I came in after the pilot, but for me and for Sarah, it was such a thrilling thing to be able to have these new voices in the room with very different perspectives, came from very different places. And Tanya Kong, who was one of our writers, an athlete, identifies as queer, Asian, so it's like we suddenly had like all these new beautiful voices in the room who could really speak to places that Sarah and I didn't necessarily always feel like we were coming from a place of power in. I like to think as a writer, you can really write all sorts of characters. You do your research, you speak from the heart, you're authentic, but to have these amazing other voices that can speak from experience, obviously, is a huge piece of the puzzle. And I think what was so exciting for us when we started talking about Tony is we had one character who was struggling with their sexuality, and then we got to tell another story about a character who that was just simply a part of her identity. The things she was actually struggling with were her anger, her sense of abandonment because she didn't have, a strong familial grouping to be a part of. So for us, that's when it got really exciting. And then to realize like, oh, the yin and yang of these two characters coming together will be really beautiful for both of them, because it will hopefully allow Shelby to become herself and become authentic, and would allow Tony to take a breath and have less fear. Now, of course, the journey in that is the exciting experience. You don't get to just have one event and then be calm in yourself. If that was the case, I'd feel a lot better in the last 30 years. You're constantly growing and evolving. So that's the joy of it, I think, is and the excitement. And I think, and what people I think are tapping into is that we're showing a lot of different experiences, and hopefully they feel really authentic to people.
Yeah, and I think they do. And I do think that like something that a lot of people, especially young women, relate to about this show is that it shows the span of queer experience and has a diversity of experience in so many different, places outside of the LGBTQ community. Well, Amy, something I wanted to ask you was, you've been producing television for teens and young women for so long, from, Gossip Girl to the Carrie Diaries. I mean that in the most utmost respect way.
I 100% embrace my experiences. They are, deeply proud of them. So it's been a long time and I'm grateful for it.
You should be. I identify as being raised on Gossip Girl. So thank you. But what I wanted to talk to you about is, what do you think makes the Wilds so relatable to and current to young women and teen girls today? Like, why is this the show that so many young girls have latched onto in the same way that they have for your shows in the past?
It's interesting because they're obviously Sex and the City, Gossip Girl, Carrie Diaries, The Wilds. They're all very different in terms of tone, energy. But I think actually what they all sort of have in common is even Gossip Girl, which is so heightened in its the world it portrays, the people in it are very authentically a part of the worlds that they're in. And I think what Sarah did so beautifully in the pilot in creating these characters is you see yourself in these people. So even if you're not Blair Waldorf living in a penthouse, you have parents who have ignored you and who haven't seen you for like the inside parts of you. So you become cold and bitchy and scary, or you become broken and addicted. And I think like what the Wilds has done that I loved about Sex and the City is we used to say like, Sex and the City is about being naked, and not literally. It was like we were really exposing emotions, I think, in a way that people had not seen in women before. Like they were raw. They were authentically themselves, even if it wasn't always appealing. And I think it's hard for me in the moment of being in an experience of a show to totally understand why it's hitting such a great mark. But I do think like the raw authenticity of characters allows you to care for them because you see yourself in them, or you feel you know them, and then you invest. I mean, twists and turns are great and are always a fun part of a show. But at the end of the day, we're telling a character-driven show, and you have to fall in love with these characters. And I think the writing is doing that, but I also obviously think this cast is allowing people to just latch on in this unbelievable way. They look at Shelby and Tony, they look at Leah or Dot, they see themselves in them, even if it's not an exact replica of them. It's like there's an essence that they feel seen. And I think that's what makes shows work for people.
Totally. And I want to talk about the fan base. I think it's no secret that the Wilds has a very fervent fan base. I think, Tony and Shelby, just from what I've seen online, have one of the biggest ship fandoms these days. So I wanted to ask Mia and Erana, is there any on-screen couple that you have felt this way about in the past? Like, who are your favorite ships of the past?
Of the past.
Or current?
We were kind of having a conversation about this the other day. We were kind of having a conversation earlier about
Fleabag and the sexy priest. That's a big one. I feel like.
Yeah, definitely.
They're great.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know. I kind of anytime, for me, it's anytime I see a relationship on screen that I believe, I'm invested. Do you know what I mean? No matter what it is, if it's working and I'm hooked, then I'm hooked and I'm standing those people.
What are some of the best or funniest things that your fans have said to you guys?
They
step
say,
on my neck, bestie.
Step on my neck, bestie. They say, punch me in the face, bestie. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you can run me over the car. Yeah, thank you. Brutal. So brutal.
Really brutal stuff. What do they say? There's been some tattoos.
Yes. Someone got shell tattooed on them. Did you hear about this, guys? Someone got shell tattooed on
the name and also the face. They got the silhouette of Shellbald.
So this is only funny because one of the things Sarah had hoped for when we would be in the writer's room, that there would be some fan art along the way. And I'm so superstitious and nervous. And I was like, poor Sarah, there's not going to be any fan art. Maybe there'll be one person and then we'll just be, and now it's they're also doing fan art of us. I was like, if you had told me, I just was so ready to be hiding under a table and feeling like they're not one. And then there's a tattoo of Shellbald. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, they have the line controls a fucking fantasy down to the front of somebody's arm. There's
a lot of tattoos.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, a lot of aggression. They want us to punch them in the face, step on their throats. Yeah. Sort of
someone
you'll get that, yeah.
Wanted me to write out a line for them to get tattooed on them, and I was like, I messaged them back because they were reaching me from Instagram and Twitter and all these different platforms, and got hold of them and I responded to them and I was like, trying to write it out and I was getting so nervous with my handwriting. I was like, this is so much pressure. And they're like, no, it's great. This is perfect. I'm like, I was so stressed, but hopefully it looks good.
That is so funny. And I mean, just so you guys know, and it is the highest honor of the lesbian community to be asked to be punched in the face or run over.
I'm gathering that.
If you're getting asked those questions or those demands, you're doing something right. Mia and Erana, this is for both of you guys. You guys have such, palpable chemistry on screen. Will you talk a little bit about how you first met and how you guys came to find that together?
So we first met on my birthday, and we were doing the pilot. We were waiting in the production office, and you came in and
chatting.
Our eyes met. No, we started chatting in the office, and then went and got dinner and hung out, and then it literally was just the rest was history. We just kind of had an instant connection, and then straight after the pilot, we went and lived in LA together.
5 days after we flew out of the pilot, I went back to Wellington, packed 2 suitcases, and flew to LA to see Mia. So
it was just we just had the best time. We just became so close instantly, and I guess we've just always had that chemistry was already there, and I think because we know each other inside and out, it kind of allows us when we're acting together and we're playing these characters to kind of...
It's just a lot of trust between us. And so, when we get to play Tony and Shelby and they are finding their trust together, it's so amazing for us because that's already there between us.
We get to spend that time as the characters, purely being the characters. We don't have to really worry about
connection.
The connection between us, because it's just there. So it does a lot of the work
day
for
on
us.
set. We were on set, and I was like, oh God, like I need to be working a bit harder. Like I need to. And then it was like, well, the hard work would be in having to try to connect with somebody that I'm not already connected with. But since we were already so disconnected, it was like that just makes the job so much easier.
We were doing the scene when we were.
Can we say?
No, we were doing the scene where we were hanging out, and then I remember walking away being like, it just feels too easy. Remember? It's just happening too easy. And then we're like, wait a second. That's a good thing. I think.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
It's a good thing.
How do each of you feel like you are similar to your character, and what do you like about them?
Similar to Tony, I think Mia can probably attest. I think I'm quite outspoken. I think I feel things very strongly, and everyone is very aware of what I'm feeling at each moment. And maybe not as aggressive as Tony, but if I'm sad, I can tell I'm feeling fucking sad, or you know what I mean. Like those things are very at the surface in the same way that Tony's is, and something that which sounds kind of arrogant now, but that's something that I admire in Tony. Like how strongly she knows herself and her unapologetic nature to just act off her impulses and just be who she is and throw herself at people. And if they catch it, they do. And if they don't, then fuck them. Like it's that energy in her is, one of my favorite things.
I feel like Shelby and I are similar in the sense that we're both quite gregarious and quite positive people. I think we're similar also in the way that we both kind of like, not like you, like I kind of will put my feelings aside to push another agenda, I guess, or kind of, it's easier for me to kind of shut off to get something done, to do a job, to achieve something. And Shelby definitely does that. She can bury until like the guilt that comes in, and like, then it just explodes. I also think we carry guilt kind of similarly, not as, what Shelby does with her guilt can be quite awful, but I definitely understand and relate to Shelby and like that feeling, that fear of guilt almost, and that the way she carries that on her shoulders, I relate to. I just love how positive she is. I love how she's just constantly trying, like, even though it's kind of like, not always the best thing for her, but she's just constantly trying to be a good person. She's got good intentions, like 24/7. And that's something that I really, really admire about her.
Yeah. I wanted to know, was there anything that you guys did to prepare for these roles in like the physical sense, whether that is like watching Survivor, doing mad push-ups, anything like that?
I feel like,
I watched a lot of Friday Night Lights, which Sarah got me onto in the pilot. You came into my trailer with the iPad and was like, watch this for the accent, just that sort of Texan culture, I guess. So I watched a lot of that. Tried to watch as many like pageant things as possible, like just YouTubing, because that's something that was so foreign to me, the whole pageant world. So that was something I really had to like dive into, but also very fun research to be doing. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I was going to say, like, when you say like preparing for like the physical space of it all, it's, it's not like we're doing studio work where you step out and it's like beautiful sunny LA and then and the physical happens for you. Do you know what I mean? Like you're in these environments and they're like tearing you down, throwing you around. And so the push-ups, like, like that kind of thing, it just isn't necessary, because if you're sprinting in and out of like waist deep water, like your heart's pumping, like your adrenaline's going, your legs are moving, like the environment helped us prepare, really.
Yeah,
it was, she was our friend.
And Sarah and Amy, was there anything like that you guys did that was funny world building research that you had to do to, get the authenticity of being stranded on an island?
Well, the whole writer's room watched that show alone. It's that
I love Alone.
Obsessed.
So good.
It's like the Cadillac of Survivor shows. It's, because the people are alone, the eponymous title. And so you're reliant on your own resources. And what was so telling when we were watching that is, the people who were comfortable being with themselves, rather than social situations, or people who had this immensely rich inner life were often the ones who were, that went the distance. And I think it was just encouraging for us in the writer's room to really lean into that, is because, when it comes down to it, all of these characters really do have rich inner lives and a lot of resources that maybe they didn't even know about before they were on this island. But as they're there and they're discovering things, they're discovering the depth of their resilience. Then it really shows, and they, are outperforming, I think, what they would have even expected for themselves. So that was definitely a big informative source.
Just even that when, like, the amount of shit that comes up from the water, like the kinds of fun ideas that it inspired, like, oh, they can make nets for fishing, or awful plastic comes up in the water, like all these different ideas that kind of inspired other ideas for us in the room was really, Alone for me was one of those things, like the people who had the most work to do on themselves kind of collapsed a bit. And that to us is a little bit like what is happening for us on this show. It's like they're surviving physically, and actually that sense of resilience and understanding, because they're not alone, they're in a group of 8 girls, is allowing them to also sort of start dealing with this is Sarah's whole premise for the show, is it's a metaphor for adolescence. Like, how do you survive these enormous life and death stakes of coming of age? And they're doing it, they're having to prove to themselves physically they can survive it. And then the 8 of them, I think, in many ways are helping with the figuring out the inner emotional survival, which I think is a big part of the show.
Yeah. And, something I found really interesting about Shelby is, all of the girls experience this, I think, in their own way, but just relating to it personally from the queer side of things, it kind of takes being totally freed from her homophobic household and upbringing to be able to, experience anything and move forward. And I was lucky to not be raised in a household like that, but I think most queer people can relate to the experience of, whether it's just like moving to LA or New York, or like just a city where there are other queer people, and then getting to open up a little bit more and, be around your people is so important. And speaking to what we were talking about before with the range of queer experience on the show, I think there's kind of this assumption these days that Gen Z is so past everything with, sexuality and gender, when it's just not true for so much. Speaking to America, the whole middle of us are still experiencing a lot of that stuff. So I wanted to talk to you, Mia, about this. Would you say, in your experience, from what you've seen in your own life, what do you think about, is our culture generally pretty accepting of queer people these days? Or, can you see how both stories really play out in real life?
I think I was raised in a family with parents who were very heavily involved in the queer community and very involved in that community. And it was interesting for me growing up and reaching towards the end of high school and early high school, and realizing that people were like using homophobic slurs, and I didn't really understand what it even meant, because it's just not the kind of the home that I'd come from and the environment that I'd been brought up in. And I think, becoming an adult and realizing what queer people really go through all the time, and the history that's there doesn't just go away overnight. And it's not something that, that people can just sort of like accept one day and everyone's just like going to be legends about it. Like there are still some people out there that are like not. So I think what's really good is like shows like this, you know, showing queer people and having that be accessible to people across the world to like go on Amazon and watch, or like any other show that tells queer stories, and watch these characters just be completely themselves and be human. And it's a shame. It's a shame that people have to kind of, like what you were saying earlier, like kind of free themselves from the shackles of their upbringing or their home in order to be free in themselves. But I guess it's kind of true. Like sometimes you have to lose yourself in order to find yourself. And I think that's a huge thing in the queer community. I think that's a big part of the culture. But yeah, I don't think it's gone away at all, for sure.
Yeah. And Erana, you play a queer Indigenous character, an identity that we almost never see represented on TV, if ever. I'm not sure. What was that like for you, and how did you bring your own experience to the role?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing being able to play Indigenous character. Like when obviously being Indigenous and coming into this industry, you hope that there's people that are going to write stories that you're able to tell, or that there's going to be a space for your voice here. And so then having Sarah and Amy write this character that is Indigenous, and, you know, I'm Maori. And so then there's also this other side, since I'm from New Zealand, it's like, and you're trying to come into an American industry, and, you know, I'm aware that the truest experience that I can tell is one of being an Indigenous Maori person. And so being able to just play an Indigenous person, period, without having to be specific on where that person is from, but just speak from that experience is like, it's amazing. It opens up the opportunity of storytelling for me, and also opens up the opportunity for people to see themselves in that character, regardless of just being Indigenous anywhere. And then going back to what I was saying before about like one of my favorite things about Toni, about how fiercely she knows herself, and that being wrapped up in her queer identity it's just so powerful. And doubling her queer and her Indigenous identity, and how it's something that she's just is so fiercely strong in. I admire her a lot for it, I think.
Yeah, no, and both of your characters are so great on, the opposite sides of the spectrum in some ways, and they're both great to see. On a much lighter note, Mia, you are on TikTok, like so many of us in the past year. I just want to know, like, what corners of TikTok you're on, because my algorithm went straight to lesbian TikTok. I'm on like baby TikTok and sword TikTok. Like, what is your For You page?
It changes. When I first got TikTok, it definitely went straight to lesbian TikTok, and I didn't know much about TikTok, and I was just like, fuck, this app is sick. You know what I mean? And then it changed, and then it went to like food. We were talking about baby TikTok the other day. Gender reveals. I don't know why that was like, I don't know how it works, but it's constantly changing. But there's always dogs. I'm always on dog TikTok. That's always been
Is anyone else here on TikTok?
I mean, like I have a TikTok, like I do. And I when the show started coming out, people started following me. I was like, I changed my name to like Blonde Bed at 69 or something ridiculous. I don't know. But
now everyone knows.
I don't know how they found it. But I am on TikTok, but I don't know, there's a lot of social media to keep up with. So I'm like kind of cleansing myself of a few at the moment. So I've like let go of Twitter. I'm in the process of letting go of TikTok. Like I'm just trying to, but TikTok is one that I miss and I think about often, which probably is.
Yeah. It's so fun. Also, I saw, Amy, your hand went up. You're on TikTok.
I am on TikTok. I have a daughter, so I have a daughter, so I'm trying to kind of figure out what she's into. And there's a lot of Stranger Things edits, and she's interested in all the wild edits. So we watch those together. And she's very into makeup transformations, not the sort of beautiful ones, but the scary with latex and blood. So that's become a big part of my TikTok life. And dogs. Dogs are always going to be a part of my TikTok life. And that would definitely be the lead on my FYP page for sure.
Somebody sent me a TikTok the other day that was like a makeup change that somebody like painted their face so much that they looked identical to Cate Blanchett. And it wasn't even like, I was like, I don't even find this cool. This is like scary.
The makeup ones for me are truly incredible because it's like, it goes from like, it looks like they have a zipper. Like I'm so blown away by the artistry actually on TikTok. I'm super impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great space. And I feel like, queer people have really found a home on TikTok. And I'm sure that there are some pretty crazy, the wilds edits, as you guys are saying. I will be searching for them after this.
It's definitely a lot of Shoni.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's where all the tattoos are coming from, is Shoni TikTok. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. Sarah, something that I have heard you say in a past interview is that the island is a metaphor for adolescence. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on this, because I think it's such an interesting and timely idea. And how that might specifically apply to Tony and Shelby and the queer experience, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that adolescence is such a part of our lives that we all vividly remember if you have, passed beyond it. And if you're in it, it is so intense and vivid. It is just an incredibly heightened time of your life, emotionally, on a familial level, in terms of your self-discovery. And so when I conceived of the show, the pairing of adolescence and deserted island felt so natural because in somewhat dramatic terms, if I am to put it in this way, it is a time of your life that is extremely challenging. It is extremely revelatory. It is harrowing at times. It is also enormously beautiful at times. Think about those island visuals from New Zealand. That like breathtaking, sublime beauty is also something that you encounter in adolescence that you might, never encounter again. Maybe you will, hopefully you will. But it's like this crystal goblet of like beauty and fear. And it also is something that like, not everybody makes it through it. In one piece. Not everybody makes it through it as they were, before they entered it. They will inevitably be changed on the other side of it. When you get off the island, when you get on the other side of coming of age, you look at yourself, you look inside yourself, and you see the immense change. There's no real going back. And that's what's happening with these young women, when they are off the island, as we've seen, they are, patently not the same in some really incredibly positive ways, and this is the kind of Gretchen's thesis that she's probably going to end up really pointing to, which is that I might have put these young women through the hell of this island, but there's a lot of strength that came out of it. That's the essence of that metaphor. And it just keeps revealing its truth as we move forward.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So to wrap this all up, I just wanted to know, throwing this out there to anyone who can answer, if there's anything about season 2 that you can tell us, especially if it has to do with Shoni.
Come on.
You will get to see more of them. You will get to see more of them. They will not leave the island. You will get to see more of them this season. Yeah, I think, look, we're on a journey with these characters that we adore, and I think we can comfortably say we come back to the island. So we're going to be very much with Shoni. As the next portions of the show and the things that have happened to them at the finale become, how that affects them. So nothing's ever a straight line. How's that,
in a environment like a deserted island that is beating you up physically and on a survival level, these two have reached for each other, have found each other. But I think it is a sincere, earnest, pure love. I think in a vacuum, even in the real world, they might have found a way to find each other and be together. But on an island, this relationship is an incredibly wonderful resource for them to find strength and comfort in a very harrowing world. But I think that we might find that things can happen that will even challenge that union. It seems so ironclad and such a wonderful source for both of them. But there are elements here that can challenge even the tightest of this. As tight as this bond is, it's not invulnerable.
No one is safe.
That was a threat.
I'm definitely going to be getting some scary Twitter responses to that, I'm sure.
Oh no. Well,
no one is safe, including me.
remember that punch me in the face, run me over. These are good things. So if it's not, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this, for being here. This was so fun. And I'm looking forward to season 2.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you so much, Jill.